What do we have here? John Boehner. I am joining the board of Acreage Holdings because my thinking on cannabis has evolved. I'm convinced descheduling the drug is needed so we can do research, help our veterans, and reverse the opioid epidemic ravaging our communities. Well, holy shit. That sounds about like you just jump to the left of the most liberal Democrats on the issue right there. We have descheduling, we have opioid related things being qualifying conditions, veterans. Yeah, nobody in the Republican Party and most of the people in the Democratic Party are not on board with any of those platforms, or I mean, those positions in those platforms anyway, especially the descheduling. A lot of the people, like, we're wondering about Kamala Harris. I seen an article about how she's supposed to be the greatest ally for legalization. Oh, come on. She hasn't even signed on to Cory Booker's bill or any other bill for that matter, but she hasn't even really squawked anything more than a rescheduling kind of platform or position, I guess. I don't know why I keep calling these platforms. But anyway, the research, a lot of people on the right are against the research even. Veterans, we've had the guy that was Obama's guy, didn't want to have research for veterans, didn't want to have veterans be able to get a recommendation from their doctor for cannabis. So that's a two-party jumper. Opioids usually, and most states that have medical marijuana don't have opioid related things for qualifying conditions. And a lot of places with CBD only laws or whatever are trying to fight and resist having chronic pain being a qualifying condition. So, yeah, John Boehner totally coming out of nowhere with this. Got to give the guy credit. He knows how to stay in the news. So let's check it out. I pulled a couple of articles about it real quick just to cap this off. I tried to find a video, but it was all just bullshit, people acting all goofy and shit. Like on CNN, I just can't hack it, man. I'm not in the mood for it. So former House Speaker John Boehner is the latest public official to endorse significant marijuana law reforms after leaving office. Over the last 10 or 15 years, the American people's attitudes have changed dramatically, he told Bloomberg. Quote, I found myself in that same position. Boehner, along with former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld, Republican, is joining the board of advisors of Acreage Holdings, which holds 35 licenses for cannabis businesses across the U.S. So these guys are literally the corporate takeover that I always talk about, and this whole thing right here going on is one of those parts of the corporate takeover. Let me make sure you can see that. Nope. Huh. Well, that's weird. Let me see if I can. Does that matter? No. Anyway, one of the planks of my supposed corporate marijuana takeover that I talk about, and I'll just read that for you even though you can't see it, is that let's see, it's over here. Corruption is rampant. Large operators are former lobbyists who lobbied for certain regulations and fee amounts. Sometimes they are actually former prohibitionists. Politicians, police agents, and any number of other criminal justice community members like judges and probation officers. And he's just another example. We see this happening in Canada big time, where a lot of people getting involved in the licenses, some of the consulting, and some of the actual businesses are being ran by former police, politicians, and others who were on the record as being hardline prohibitionists through and through. And I read that from, by the way, in case you're not in case you don't know, I'm working on a article or essay, whatever you want to call it, that basically has that tells you about the corporate marijuana takeover. Because people ask about that a lot. I talk about it a lot and whatnot. So if you looked at, if you've seen my last weekly show, I did talk about that right off the bat. Like, you don't have to watch the whole 4-hour show to see it. I read the bullet points off, and I even added a couple on there. So if you want to check that out, it's about 10 minutes. So anyway, back to the story at hand here. Quote, when you look at the number of people in our state and federal penitentiaries who are there for possession of small amounts of cannabis, you begin to really scratch your head, Boehner said. We have literally filled up our jails with people who are nonviolent and frankly do not belong there. All right, now when it comes to people coming around like this, I kind of think that they always knew that all this prohibition shit was the wrong way, and it was like, you know, like he just said, all these innocent people basically sitting in prison for freaking for any drugs really, but for marijuana offenses, come on. But when they come around, or when they come around publicly with statements like that, I gotta say thank you, but at the same time, man, why? And I mean, a lot of people will echo this sentiment. If you felt like this now, it seems like that means you have some kind of compassion. Seems like that you actually have empathy. Why would you be in control of so much powerful shit? You're such a powerful person in the government, as he was, which was Speaker of the House. Why didn't you do anything under the banner of trying to reverse the horrible prohibition laws that, you know, the federal government is basically the champions of? Here's his tweet. Dude, I got that. Yeah, it's right here anyway. I'm joining the board of Acreage Holdings. I think we already read that. Yeah. So, I'm sorry. In 2011 letter to a constituent, the speaker wrote, I am unalterably opposed to the legalization of marijuana or any other FDA Schedule I drug. I remain concerned that legalization will result in increased abuse of all varieties of drugs, including alcohol. That's kind of weird. So if you thought that people smoking weed, legalized, you know, legal weed, would lead to increased use of alcohol, or abuse for that matter of alcohol, seems like he'd be for it, because from what I understand, he was a long time, he's been propped up by the alcohol lobby. So the food and beverage lobby, if you will. But I think he's still heavily invested in that. Now Boehner says he and Weld will advise Acreage on navigating confusing and conflicting federal and state marijuana laws. When it comes to an issue like this that has what I'll call murky legal issues and political issues, we're there to provide advice to Acreage in terms of how they work with state and federal governments and how they work with local governments, and advise on what states look promising, he told Bloomberg. So basically, because they're Republicans, they're going to go to these states that weren't cool before, and they're going to kind of like grease the skids for, you know, regulations that will allow at least whatever their Acreage Holdings runs to be able to operate in them places. And this is a pretty good business plan for people that people that think, well, you know, Republican places like Alabama and, you know, Tennessee, they're never going to legalize recreational marijuana. Well, maybe they're not, but everybody has laws in motion right now that are being talked about on the floor of their state houses, or people are pushing ballot initiatives and stuff, and local ordinance type things, like he just said, all the way down to local governments right here, how they will work with local governments. So even if you have a state like Colorado where it's fully legalized, there's still places in Colorado that have opted out, I think, or, you know, maybe they have opted out of the medical marijuana as well. And maybe not in Colorado, but in other places that has happened. In Michigan, it's a really big problem. because we're just at the beginning of the licensing phase and all these people have opted out. And I'm going to make a video just about this opting out and how bad it is and how much it's hurting programs and whatnot. But basically, Boehner is saying that they're going to go in there and be like, hey, I work with acreage and we do this stuff here, and, you know, we see what your rules are, and we want to set up in your town, but you don't have laws for it, so let us set up here and blah, blah, blah. And basically, this is just like carving out little niches all over the place, and you'll see later that acreage is, they're operating in many states. They're a nationwide operation that has facilities in places all over the country. So it's kind of what I just said seems to me like the most logical reason for acreage to want to have people like John Boehner and this other guy who is a libertarian. So you have a Republican and Weld who's a libertarian. They can talk to the people in those right-wing states. Where Democrats aren't really the people that are going to be able to get things done for you, if you know what I mean. And a lot of companies and people with their efforts to legalize cannabis, like Marijuana Policy Project and Safe Access, Americans for Safe Access, they're having harder times getting anything done in those states. But, you know, because they're more broadly known for helping movements succeed in places like Colorado and California and shit. So it's like, you know, the Republicans in those states that are totally against legalization are going to be more receptive to a John Boehner than they are to like Martin Tvert. Is that his name? No. Mason Tvert. Sorry, Mason. I haven't talked about you in a long time, so, you know, make some headlines, dude. I love you. All right, back to this. The former top GOP official is critical of U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions' decision to reverse Obama-era guidance that generally allowed states to implement their own cannabis policies without federal interference. Quote, when I saw the announcement, I almost chuckled to myself, Boehner said. I don't know why they decided to do this. It could be that the Attorney General is trying to force the Congress to act. Oh, yeah, that good old 3D chess. You know, like, I go out there and bark like a dog about some stupid law that needs to be changed, and nobody will change it. Nobody's going to change it if you don't pry them off their couches and chairs and make them go do it, right? So maybe, you know, maybe there's something to that. I don't know. I mean, when I look at Jeff Sessions and I look at his track record, I don't think that's him. I don't think he's playing 3D chess to try to make the Congress act. But in Jeff, to go the other way and say maybe that is what it is, Jeff Sessions actually says all the time, hey, if you don't like the laws that are on the books, you got to go through Congress and change that shit, you know. And in the old days, that was kind of a dog whistle for regular citizens to just, you know, write letters to their congressman or whatever. And we do all that stuff. I mean, there's no shortage of that kind of activism going on a frequent basis to where it's hard to even organize something like that anymore. So anyway, more. In a press release about their joining acreage, Boehner and Weld, who was the Libertarian Party's 2016 vice presidential nominee. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. So, yeah, this guy can talk to people that might not necessarily like John Boehner, because we know from talking about other stories, the Republican Party is just as fractured as the Democratic Party, really, when it comes down to it. You have, like, all these different factions that don't really agree with each other, and if you remember, the Tea Party never really liked John Boehner because he didn't like Ted Cruz too. There was another thing where him and the Tea Party didn't get along because of some of the the tax fights that happened during the end of the Bush era and the beginning of the Obama era. So anyway, he said the following. While we come at this issue from a different perspective and track records, we both believe this time has come for serious consideration of a shift in federal marijuana policy. Over the past 20 years, a growing number of states have experimented with their right to offer cannabis programs under the protection of the 10th Amendment. During that period, those rights have lived somewhat in a state of conflict with federal policy. Also during this period, the public perception of cannabis has dramatically shifted, with 94% of Americans currently in favor of some type of access. A shift driven by increased awareness of marijuana's many medical applications. Quote, we need to look no further than our nation's 20 million military veterans, 20% of whom, according to a 2017 American Legion survey, reportedly use cannabis to self-treat PTSD, chronic pain, and other ailments. Yet the VA does not allow its doctors to recommend its usage. There are numerous other patient groups in America whose quality of life has been dramatically improved by the state-sanctioned use of medical cannabis. Quote, while the 10th Amendment has allowed much to occur at the state level, there is still many negative implications of the federal policy to schedule cannabis as a Class 1 drug, most notably the lack of research, the ambiguity of financial services, and the refusal of the VA to offer it as an alternative to the harmful opioids that are ravishing our communities. We are excited to join the team at Acreage in pursuit of their mission to bring safe, consistent, and reliable products to patients and consumers who could benefit. We have full confidence in their management team and believe this is the team that will transform the debate, policy, and landscape around the issue. And again, and I think we see a quote later on here. I got one more article. But basically, like, I see some of the stuff in their statement there kind of elusive to actual policy kind of hints and stuff. So, and one of those was when he says this, we are excited to join the team at Acreage in pursuit of their mission to bring safe, consistent, and reliable products to patients and consumers who could benefit. Now, that almost alludes to Schedule 2 type policies that have specific products, and this would be like non-smokable, even no flower sales, or it might even include flower sales and more specific dosage amounts for those and whatever. I mean, this just sounds like a really highly regulated situation for medical marijuana only, and that's one of the things that they're probably pushing for. And when he's talking about descheduling, keep in mind that that only just makes it so it's no longer the federal government's business. That's up to the states to implement their own marijuana policies, just like they would be kind of like, you already think that that's kind of what they're doing, is they're like, well, you know, Tennessee didn't do this or that, but Indiana wants to decriminalize that. And there's a medical marijuana fight going on in Missouri and Louisiana. So there's all these different things going on, but nobody is, you know, there's only a few places in this country left where 100% prohibition is like, you know, the mainstream thinking, and people are like all the way for it. But like they say, and like we are seeing everywhere, the stigma is really bad still, and we really are dealing with a public perception thing issue, because the reefer madness was so effective and is still brainwashed. Just the vast majority of our population is still under this complete cloud of misinformation and spell that the government is right around the corner, always ready to pounce on you, and it is pretty absurd. Yeah, I didn't like this video either. It was just a little quick production. And it's like nobody does reporting anymore. They just kind of like make these quick videos that have words that you have to read and pictures of people doing stuff. So I don't really like that. I don't even like what I'm doing. I hardly ever watch shows where people just read the news to you and maybe give you their opinion. I mean, just a few. So here's a couple more things going on. Boehner reiterated his opposition to legalization as recently as September 2015. Nearly 500,000 people were arrested for selling weed during Boehner's term as Speaker from 2011 to 2015, courts reported. Boehner is joined on the board of advisors by former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld, a Republican who left office in 1997 and was former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson's running mate in 2016 on the Libertarian Party ticket. As governor, Weld advocated for medical marijuana legalization since 1992. Legal marijuana sales topped $9 billion in 2017, according to one industry estimate. Worldwide, legal marijuana could be a $57 billion industry by 2027, according to a report by ArcView Market Research. Weld, a former federal prosecutor, said the conventional wisdom about marijuana during the Reagan administration was that it acted as a gateway drug to more harmful substances. Quote, now there's some evidence that it can become an exit drug as an alternative to opioid addiction, which has become the primary public health concern in Massachusetts, Weld said in an interview with The Post. Weld said his advocacy will likely find appeal among conservatives who champion state laws to regulate issues without federal interference. Morgan Fox, a spokesman for pro-legalization marijuana policy project, told the New York Times that Boehner, quote, should be actively working to reform federal marijuana laws to allow states to determine their own policies rather than just consulting with business to navigate the conflicts between state and federal law. And like I said, if the state law that he goes to do some consulting work or whatever to try to help these guys expand into more regions, one of the things he might do is use their laws to the advantage of the company to keep other companies from coming in. Like if they can afford to lose money in a place like Indiana making medical marijuana, or even Illinois where there's no smoking, or Philadelphia or Florida, and wherever, not Philadelphia necessarily, but Pennsylvania, wherever you have these no smoking medical marijuana laws. I don't know if Pennsylvania, they're talking about changing that. I'll have to talk to somebody about that. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is that they might go lose money somewhere in one state while nobody else will take the chance to operate, because it's pretty well known that you'll lose money. Even in like Texas, where they have the CBD only program going on, I mean, there will be people that'll take their chances and lose money in those sectors, because the future is only going to get brighter. And if you can lose money for a little while and then all of a sudden, the floodgates are open and you're already established as in the market there, you've already been, corrupting the politicians in that region or that area or that city or that state, so that by the time the laws relax and more access is available for patients, or recreational gets legalized, you'll already be there with a big market share. So that's kind of what I'm seeing from this endeavor. And what Morgan Fox said here, I can't agree with it more. I mean, if John Boehner wants the best for acreage, he's doing it in a selfish way. It would be doing the best for everybody involved. If he would lobby to some of the people he knows in Washington to maybe Pete Sessions. Does he know Pete Sessions? Maybe he can talk to him and try to get him to budge off of his, ridiculous, I don't know what you want to call it, the way he's still stuck on this old reefer madness. I hate to keep calling it that, but there is really no other word for it. Keeps sticking to the old propaganda, which is, we know they don't believe that shit. They're just saying it because it's the only thing they can do, and they know they look stupid doing it, so they get mad when they have to do it, which is what we've seen with Pete Sessions last couple times he did it. Do you think he really believes that marijuana leads to deadly heroin overdoses? Because that's the stories he tells. That's the web he spins. Maybe John Boehner can talk some sense into somebody like Pete Sessions, or even Jeff Sessions, just because he heard Jeff Sessions do this thing and he chuckled. I don't like that. Don't chuckle. Get on the horn and talk some sense into this old goofball, this Keebler elf. So one last little thing here, and then we'll get out of here. Acreage Holding, a main player in the increasingly white-collar marijuana trade, will expand its research initiatives among universities as it seeks to demystify cannabis, Chief Executive Kevin Murphy told The Post. The company cultivates, processes, and distributes marijuana in the growing billion-dollar industry, according to its site. The company focused on veterans in its messaging because they are passionate about broadening marijuana options available to former troops, Murphy said. Well, then that's another person you could go aim at is whoever the new VA guy is going to be, all right? Like, maybe talk some sense into him. The American Legion, the largest veterans group in the country, found in a 2017 survey that veterans overwhelmingly support marijuana use for medical reasons. About 22% of veteran households said they use weed for medical reasons. And thanks whoever wrote this over at the Post for the Alex Horton and Christopher Ingram. I figured it was them. Yeah, they don't use the word pot as nearly as much as others at the Post. Alteri, I don't know who that is. I didn't highlight that, so we don't know who that is. But he says he hopes Boehner will use his influence within the GOP to extend acceptance of marijuana, which may lead to legalization laws for veterans and non-veterans alike. Yeah, thank you very much. You know, although I am a veteran, I don't like lean on that and put it out there and like act like, you know, I got this extra cool thing going on. I don't do that. I don't even like to mention it too much. But what I don't like also is when people are very passionate to fight for this just for the veterans. You know, like there's people out there that are suffering from post-traumatic stress, and there's people suffering from pain that don't want to take opioids, and they live in a place like in the middle of Ohio or West Virginia where, you know, they don't like medical marijuana much. So that's all I got on this. Seemed like I spent a little bit too much time on it, but stay tuned. More updates coming, and thanks for tuning in.